Okay, so I'm going to be talking about Vedic astrology and world events and the overview of the correct usage of outer planets in Vedic astrology. So this is going to be where I go and take a deep dive into the outer planets of Vedic astrology and really give some context and way to understand them as being different from natal astrology. I don't use them in natal astrology when I'm looking at someone's birth chart. Um, I find them unnecessary once you understand how Vedic astrology is correctly applied. Then there's really no reason to use Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They're not visible to the naked eye. 7 visible planets out to Saturn, not to mention the nakshatras, not to mention the harmonic charts, also the transits of the planets moving through the sky. This gives all of the information that you need to understand the increments of a person's life, not to mention the dasha sequence. Again, you don't have Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in the dasha sequence. You also don't have them as part of the 12 lunation cycles each year. So there are so many ways to correctly understand what's happening and the karmas, the visible karmas that are unfolding through the 7 visible planets and also the lunar nodes. I need to mention them as well. When you know how to interpret the lunar nodes in their full dimension as well, then Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto just refer to things that wind up interfering. So I'm going to, so I start this off with a very strong caveat in this regard. Again, if you're doing Western astrology or whatever, that system now, what we have as modern Western astrology, has developed so far beyond where it started. For 1,500 years, there were no outer planets in Western astrology either. And you had classical rulerships and all like that. I'm not going to comment on what people do in modern Western astrology because it's not what I do. And it works fine. People can use it, people can do it, and people can do the Neo-Vedic astrology. I don't care what people do in this regard, but I do have views about it. And I do see where the outer planets are used a bit as a crutch in the Vedic astrology, when actually first you need to understand the signs and the rulerships and whatnot through the classical Vedic astrology system. And of course, those that study with me, that's how you learn it. So this is within that context. But cultural trends and cycles can be tracked by looking at these outer planets. That's what we're going to do today. As you can see, I have all of these dates down here and then even some case studies. So we're going to get into a lot of these case studies also after we look at these trends. And I'm going to be talking about a lot of cultural shifts and trends in this class, where you can see these energies shown in the culture. And by the way, just to button this up also with the Neo-Vedic astrology and whatnot, there's a told story of a famous Indian Vedic astrologer who heard from another guru somewhere that the outer planets are Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. This is sort of bandied about. I don't ascribe to any of that. I'd kind of recommend you not either. And again, I'll discuss these planets more in the full course that I'm doing. I'm introducing them now as these concepts and constructs that you can use when you're looking at world events in this limited way. But again, if people want to consider those who are doing Neo-Vedic astrology and whatever, and they want to consider Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva as Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, that's fine. I don't. So again, I just don't have a lot of room for all of that, particularly in the natal astrology. I just think they're redundant. I don't think they're necessary. Well, I know they're not necessary because I've never used them in my practice. I can see why they're used. For example, I have Neptune close to my moon. I have Mars, Uranus, and Pluto close in my natal chart. Again, I've never needed to be able to use outer planets in order to see what is happening, particularly when you get into nakshatras, a whole 27-fold zodiac. So let's start with Uranus. Uranus is about 7 years in each sign. And this is kind of like the way you see Saturn is like 2.5 to 3 years in each sign. This is sort of an aggregate time, and these outer planets are pretty consistent. Pluto is a bit of a wild card, to say the least, which I'll get to, which I'll mention when I get to it. But Uranus and Neptune especially are pretty solid, about 7 years for Uranus, 14 years for Neptune. And Uranus refers to sudden changes and shocking events that also lead to innovation and focus. But there's also a kind of rigid fanaticism that we also see with Uranus. It's like, this is the thing. Like we kind of, in many ways, it's sort of rebellious against what we were just doing before. You could see fanaticism a lot in Uranus. So the concept of fanaticism is interesting because there's this idea that there's this new thing that we're now obsessed over and we're putting a lot of emphasis on, and we're very excited about it, and we're very we're very much innovating in this area. But then the fanaticism is sometimes in opposition to the previous thing that we might have been fanatical about, right? So that, you see this a lot with politics or with other kinds of things. Fanaticism, like on a personal level, is like a personal trait, right? I've seen so many, as you may have seen too, someone might be fanatical about one extreme of sort of politics, and then they suddenly wake up from that, and now they're fanatical about the exact opposite thing. And they're even fanatical against the thing now that they used to be fanatical for. So a lot in recent politics, particularly the transition with the politics of the left and the right, those who were very fanatical, like let's say Bernie Sanders supporters, 2016, or even in the first years of the Trump presidency, then COVID hit and conspiracies started to come out. Now all of a sudden they were completely fanatical against that, against the left, the wokeism, which they were previously who they would be calling woke. Now they're fanatical against them. And them meaning what they used to be. And they'll even say, oh, I used to be like that too, and now I realize how brainwashed and fanatical I was. So now I'm fanatical about this. So this is a quality of Uranus culturally. Now again, look at it culturally, especially in this way. And I'm just going to read through some of these so you can see we're going to go backwards through the last several trends. We're going to go back to like 1980. That's far enough. That's like 45 years or so, 43 years. So Uranus went into Aries April 2017, and it'll be there until June 2024. We see this as the rise of nationalism, authoritarianism, individualism. In many ways, that includes like protests, Black Lives Matter, Me Too protests. Again, so when I said this, to really start trying to see things from both sides and be objective, this is what I mean. From one side, let's use politics. And by the way, I apologize in advance. I live in the USA. I see a lot through the lens of USA politics, and also in its context in regard to the whole world. But so Neptune, 14 years in each sign, and again, this is about disillusion, dissolving, disappointment, fantasy, escapism, illusion, projection, creativity, naivete. So you can think of these things as, again, how we can see them also culturally and socially is where we could be prone to like propaganda, and again, illusion, the man behind the curtain sort of thing, but also just the hopium that we're the thing that we're looking to kind of save us a little bit, right? This kind of illusion that we're kind of the sort of worldly illusion. You can see very interesting shifts here. Now Neptune just went into Pisces last year, April 18th, 2022. Now again, here's why I said at the beginning, I didn't just say these things because I want to insult people that use outer planets. We've already talked about Pisces once, which had to do with things like religious fanaticism and whatnot. this is related to Jupiter. Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. And one thing that Jupiter rules culturally are the courts, court system, sense of justice, legal system, things like that, right? And again, remember, Neptune is dissolving things. Well, right at one of the biggest things that has happened since since Neptune went into Pisces, what happened last year? Roe was overturned. Not to mention the Supreme Court started overturning laws again, and the justices, this is very much dissolving a structure that had been there since early 70s. Just dissolved. And again, there was a lot of illusion about when these justices were confirmed for the court. All of them said they wouldn't do it. They said, oh, I respect settled law. It's settled law, that they would not overturn Roe. First chance they had, they did it. The Hobbes decision weakened it so that now it's a states' rights thing, and effectively it's not a right in America anymore. Courts, the court system. So again, legal upheavals, also leading to a new kind of spirituality, hopefully, an inclusive spirituality. This is a long transit. It just started. April 2022 to July 2035. But also, let's not forget, we just had the first president, ex-president now, obviously, indicted. And there's more indictments to come because these other cases look worse than that Manhattan case. The Florida documents case is that is serious. Serious. Also, the Georgia election meddling case. These are going to be other indictments. These are going to go through the courts. Our entire court system in the U.S. is being very much reconstituted, where we have a very right-wing, again, Jupiterian, religious sort of religiosity in the courts, but also the issue of the courts is an issue. This is what I also mean about seeing both sides of things. Just like when we talked about the stuff with like Reagan, and we see him as an inspiring figure, and the other things with the country. Part of that was because Neptune was in Sagittarius, which I'll get to. But there was also the other part where what was happening financially or changes in the country with the economics and whatnot was definitely much more Scorpio-like. So you could see things in different ways, and people can see them from different directions as well. Some people think it was the greatest thing ever, all this conservatism. Okay, it doesn't change the fact, though, that the money shifted from the middle class to the upper class. Some think it's the greatest thing ever. Again, you have half the countries like, yes, abortion is murder, overturn the courts. And again, they've been wanting to dissolve the court thing, to dissolve all this liberalism for a long time. And again, remember, Neptune had just been in Aquarius. I even just said up here, Aquarius is about liberalism. You might say left-wing. And Pisces is much more, Jupiter tends to be more right-wing in this context, religious. Neptune had just been in Aquarius since May 2008, which I'll get to, but you have to see it both ways. There are those who think it's the greatest thing ever. And again, Neptune is the illusion. It's kind of dissolving, where it's like, who knows what people think? Who knows what people's philosophies are? We started to see that dissolving of philosophies to kind of mean whatever we want them to mean now. We're very much in Neptune times, where the philosophies we have just sort of been dissolved, because the social structure, Neptune going through Aquarius from May 2008 to February 2022. Again, this is an incredibly powerful time. This 14 years from the election of Obama to the disappointment and disillusion with him, with the society and the political solutions. Obama was elected in 2008, and again, this audacity of hope and the rise of the people. Again, Aquarius is like the people being represented, right? Leo is like the government, the king. Aquarius is like the people. So Obama really presented himself and he was very much celebrated as a man of the people, not even just of America, but of the world. He won the Nobel Prize even after he was elected president, right? But then the disappointment with his with his appointments, appointing the head of Monsanto to head the EPA. He gets right back into the whole sort of corporate thing. Right away, he became disappointing. He passed health care, but it was also just, making sure insurance companies and Wall Street feel okay about it. He didn't come down. It definitely wasn't a socialist. And I mean socialist or socialism in the way of meaning for the people. There was no public option, which means you couldn't opt out of the government mandated solution. Again, it did nothing to rein in drug spending, insurance companies, all of this stuff. It didn't. It was sort of a half measure, but it was. And in order to get the health care, he sold the farm. He codified the Bush tax cuts. Very conservative, very incremental. As far as a Democrat and those who wanted to maybe claw back some of the liberal things that we had lost during the George Bush years, because Bush, again, went way into the tax cuts. Bush tax cuts, even more money to the wealthy. Obama talked about clawing some of that back. He didn't. They codified those so they could get health care through. Anyway, I could go into all the politics stuff, but this big illusion by the end of Obama's term, even, and those two terms, by the time we hit 2016, now we get the rise of a populist like Trump, a right-wing populist who comes out, and we see the rise of him because people were so disillusioned and disappointed. How many of these former Obama voters voted for Trump? A lot of them did. And a lot of them voted for Trump because